Okay, everybody, welcome to the Combat Zone. I'm Nick, he's Joseph, and this is where the enemy only has four things to say. Abandon ship, bail out, take cover, and we surrender. Usually in about that order. Our guest with us this evening is Roy Beyer. He lives in, now Roy, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to say Edmonton.
Well, you're wrong, but I used to live in Edmonton. It's Calgary.
Okay, who lives out west. And we've brought him
somewhere in God's country.
That's right.
I'm Joe, by the way.
Yes, he's Joe. You can tell.
Okay, now I'll shut up.
All right. Anyway, the reason we've got Roy, our friend Roy, who is a quasi Western correspondent for us on occasion. He's pretty plugged into what's going on out there. We wanted to talk to him tonight about life under Jason Kenney and Western separation and alienation. So, welcome to the show, Roy. It's been a while since we chatted last.
It's been a while. I hope you've had a good first half of your summer there.
Yeah, it's been actually, it hasn't been overly hot. All this climate nonsense about, hottest summer ever. I could take more of it.
You heard that we've, of course, because the media is very honest, that we've had one of the coolest summers ever out west.
Wasn't there snow in northern Alberta and Saskatchewan just a little while ago?
Oh yeah, yeah. Anyway, we could talk forever about that. I know that's not the topic of the day, but it's one of those funny things. We note that whenever there's a climate disaster anywhere in the world, that's highlighted, and of course, we've had a decent summer, but cool here in the West, and good amount of rain, which is we're grateful for, in BC as well. So no forest fires this year caused by climate change. So that's a good thing.
Well, obviously the government solved that problem last year when they said, "Oh my God, we got to put these fires out. It's all global warming."
Well, we don't want to talk about global warming and all that stuff, but I just want to say this. You know what the danger is? That when the planet starts cooling because of the natural cyclical changes, that people like Justin Trudeau are then going to run around claiming victory, saying they saved the planet. So we're going to lose this argument, whatever happens.
Yeah, I know the point. Yeah. Anyway, we'll shift gears now.
Yes.
Just throw that.
So, Jason Kenney has been in office now in Alberta as the premier for a little over a year. And in that year, how have things changed? Have they changed for the better or the worse? Like, is it better off in Alberta now that Kenney's at the helm?
Well, I think most Albertans know that a big part of the problem we have is on the federal level, and Jason Kenney simply was able to fix one half of the problem, and we had a socialist government that drove our economy into the ground severely. But Jason certainly has done everything humanly possible as a premier to begin to turn things around. But the real problem is at the federal level, and we're waiting for October to fix that problem.
All right, well, give us an example. Yeah, no kidding. I don't think you're alone. Give us an example of some of the changes that Jason Kenney has incorporated to undo some of the damage that Notley left behind.
Well, he immediately, of course, fought for with Saskatchewan and other provinces for changes in the carbon tax law, and of course looking for the pipeline to be built, promoting the idea of along with Andrew Scheer of a energy corridor that's across Canada, promoting the idea of free trade between the provinces of our own country, which is a pretty crazy thing to think about, that we don't have free trade between the provinces, but that's some of the things that he's fighting for. Lowering just making the entry point for teenagers to get into the workforce. They changed the minimum wage up to $15 for everyone, and the net effect of that is that teenagers couldn't get a job in Alberta, And of course, it just makes sense to make a distinction between adults and teenagers as far as minimum wage. And so lots more people are getting employed, getting jobs as a result of some of those common sense changes. But the big change is only going to happen once we can build an actual pipeline to export our Canadian oil to the rest of Canada or overseas or both. And that's all being held up at the federal level. But Jason Kenney is putting in a very significant fight on behalf of Albertans. And what we had before with the Premier as a Premier that was in cooperation with the destructive policies of the federal government of Justin Trudeau. And so it's a much better mood now in Alberta, but we still have the really big change that needs to take place this fall.
Yeah, I don't think, again, there's not going to be too many people argue with you. I mean, as a provincial premier, you have a lot of power, but in Canada, the bulk of the power lies in the PMO, in the Prime Minister's office. And if he decides that something is in the national interest, he can walk all over people like Jason Kenney and impose any kind of mandate on them he wants. Now, does Jason Kenney strike you as the guy who would pull the notwithstanding clause trigger?
Yeah, I mean, Jason Kenney is without doubt the smartest premier that we've ever had in my lifetime. I know him personally. He's brilliant and he's strategic and he's principled, high integrity person. So I have an expectation that when and where necessary, he'll certainly use the notwithstanding clause. And but I think what's immediately in front of us is the question of Alberta's participation in Confederation. I mean, we're seeing a huge amount of transfer payments to the rest of the country, and at the same time, our economy has been decimated by the deliberate action of the federal government. And I know most ordinary people are not aware of that. That's why we're doing this program, so that ordinary people understand the extent of the damage that Justin Trudeau has done. But Jason Kenney is the type of person that knows in the political sphere how to play chess versus checkers, if you understand the analogy. He's quite aware of all the tactics that are and the strategies he has in front of him, and knows when to make a move and when not to make a move. So I believe that he's easily. And by the way, you mentioned that he was sworn in. I mean, he was elected a year ago. I know it might have felt like a year ago. It was only in April of this year that he was elected. So it's a very short period of time that he's been premier. And his first 100 days as premier has just come and gone now. And I would say most people in this province are very, very happy with his leadership.
Well, that's encouraging on a lot of ways. I'm just wondering about the mood, because you're always going to have people on the other side. There is also a trickle-over effect. Like, do you have friends in other provinces who are going, I like what I see in Alberta? And I know it's early, and maybe it's too early to make this kind of statement, but are you beginning to see people moving to Alberta with a little more hope that their own personal fortunes will improve, because now it's being led by somebody who's actually cares about the province rather than an agenda?
I wish I could say yes to that, but the answer is no. I don't think even Jason Kenney would have an expectation that things have turned around to that extent here in Alberta. And again, this I'm trying to avoid hyperbole and exaggeration, but people need to understand that Justin Trudeau has been very aggressive in his opposition to Alberta, our economy, our core industry. Oil and gas is to Alberta probably proportionately twice as big, proportionately, as what the auto industry is to Ontario. Okay? So if you think about a percentage of people that are affected by the auto manufacturing industry in Ontario, double that number and you'll understand how big the oil and gas industry is to Albertans. And imagine for a moment a prime minister that on purpose, deliberately destroyed the auto industry in Ontario and imagine the response and reaction of Ontario. That's where Alberta is right now. There has never been I guess the closest comparison you'd have to go back to a person named Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He is the other person with the National Energy Program that caused severe damage to the Alberta economy. We thought that nightmare would never repeat itself. It's much worse, the actions of Justin Trudeau. And like I say, it's deliberate. It's on purpose, decimating the economy. So the net effect of that is that, you have in downtown Calgary all these big oil companies. Some of the biggest oil companies in North America are even Canadian companies. And the majority of their profits that they're producing currently in Canada are being reinvested in other countries, most of it in the United States. Over $200 billion, well over $200 billion has been reallocated from Canada to the United States in the oil and gas sectors just in the last 3 years. So, and I know there's still billions, literally, I wouldn't say without exaggeration, tens of billions that are ready to move depending on the results of the election this fall. Either stay in Canada or leave Canada. Money is very, very flexible. It can cross borders super fast. It's the ordinary blue-collar worker who's stuck in Red Deer or Grand Prairie or some other smaller town that is stuck with all the equipment he bought to be a service industry worker, and now he has no work. And that's the reality here in Alberta, is that the oil industry has been damaged severely, and Jason Kenney himself cannot turn it around. I'd like to say this. Ontario, ordinary people, blue-collar, white-collar, just ordinary people, we need to understand that if we want to keep our country together, we need to replace this prime minister, and we need to elect a prime minister that will help, first of all, recover the losses and heal the damage between the West and the rest of Canada.
Excuse me. So because you really only have two choices. As you know, a lot of people like Max Bernier, but let's face it, he'll be, in my estimation, he'll be lucky to get himself, never mind anybody from his party. And I'm not being unusually cruel, or I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic about his chances. But the bottom line is that he's a brand new party. It's a Max plus anybody who wants to go with him party. So his standing is going to be a third party that is a voice but doesn't really have much influence. So you're stuck between Trudeau, which nobody wants, and Andrew Scheer. Now, in the press, you hear a lot of people talking about Andrew Scheer saying, "Well, he's like a marshmallow man. He just leaves me. I just don't feel connected to him." How do people out west view Andrew Scheer?
Well, it's two things I want to comment on. I guess, first of all, Max Bernier says that as being a former Reform Party guy, right, I was part of the movement out west that started the Reform Party, and we justified it. We thought we need a different political party to counter the progressive conservatives. The net effect of it is we elected Liberal governments year after year after year after year. It was only after we merged the two parties and brought them together, the Reform Party movement, which morphed into the Alliance Party, and then later, finally, we brought them together under the Conservative Party banner. So to me, I think it's absolutely insane to think that this is a smart move to start another Conservative Party. It's a huge mistake. The better Max Bernier does, the more likely we'll be stuck with Prime Minister Trudeau.
Oh, man.
Because it will split the vote down the middle everywhere. And, and of course, we have a more recent example right here in Alberta. It's like people said, how the heck did you end up with an NP government in Alberta? Well, that's simple math, folks. We had the Wild Rose Party and we had the Conservative Party. And guess what? We split the votes. if you combine the votes of those two parties in Alberta, we would have had a majority Conservative government instead of 4 years of NDP. And so it's a nightmare scenario from my perspective. It's ironic on policy. I agree with Max Bernier a lot. It's just like I agreed with Manning, Preston Manning. I agreed with him. But the net effect was you just have to look at the political structure and fit within that structure. The smartest strategy for Maxime Bernier would be to either step out of politics and be a voice for conservatism, just like for a long time Stephen Harper did that during the Reform years and during the years of the Alliance Party. And he was a leader in waiting. And that's what Maxime should have done. He should have been a leader in waiting. Instead, he's causing this scenario of division of the conservative movement, and we are more desperate than ever in the history of our country to bring the conservative vote together to elect a conservative government. Because the nightmare scenario, and I'm telling people, like, this will have serious consequences for Canada, no doubt at all, that if we ended up with a split vote and somehow Justin Trudeau ends up as Prime Minister under a minority government with the Green Party and the NDP helping him form government, it will be, without doubt, within a year after that, we'll have a separatist vote in Alberta. I have no doubt in my mind it'll be that fast. And so, people need to understand that we have a political system that works the way it does. Whoever gets the majority vote in a riding, that's who your MP is going to be, and they can get elected with 25%. And so there's no logic to Bernier and the People's Party and everything else he's doing. History proves it's a dumb strategy. It's a mistake, and I believe that if anything, it's going to cause a huge amount of damage to the future of this country. Not because his policy is wrong, but because his strategy is wrong. And that's exactly what I see in the whole scenario of how he can damage the outcome of the election coming up here in October.
Roy, I agree with you completely on your assessment. The only thing I would add, and I don't want anybody out there listening to think that this is intended to be a shot at Andrew Scheer, the Conservative Party, but I think it's also important to remember that everything that you've said applies to the Conservative Party or the Conservative establishment as well. And quite often, and I know this was the case as you very well know yourself, Roy, with the history of the Reform Party, there was a reason why there was that alienation out there. And, partly it was because, and I think, by the way, we just lost Roy, so we'll give him a call back in a second. But there was a lot of alienation because the conservative establishment, the people who were running the Progressive Conservative Party at the time, were not paying attention to the needs or the desires of a significant, truly, I would say, conservative segment of their base. And so I just think that the criticism and the concern that you're raising, Roy, are completely valid. But I'd be remiss if I didn't jump in and say that criticism also has to be directed towards the conservative establishment, the power brokers within the party, that have to pay attention to the desires and the needs of their own constituency rather than completely, abandoning the conservatives within their party in order to chase after this elusive target that we like to call the center of the political spectrum. So that's kind of my take on that. We've lost Roy there for a second, guys. I'm going to try to get him back, and I don't know, maybe Nick has something or other to say here.
I was just going to say it's time for break anyway, so I'm going to do the break, and then we'll get Roy back, and we'll carry on with segment 2. Oh, well, okay, fine. Well, tell you what, you get Roy back, and all I'm going to say is that with Roy's analysis, it's hard to argue. Now, I understand the desire, as you were articulating, the idea that we have people who feel frustrated and left out by the Conservatives, whether it's here in the province of Ontario or at the federal level, and undoubtedly out in Alberta. And those are usually SOCON.
Hello.
Roy, we got you back.
We do.
All right. I was just saying that while we were getting you back that...
you missed my diatribe there, Roy. I was agreeing with you, Roy, for the most part. I was just pointing out that we have to have everything you said doesn't just apply to the people like Andrew Scheer, but it has to apply to the power brokers and the establishment within the Conservative Party as well. And it's important to keep Conservatives within the party rather than saying, okay, you guys go off to the back of the bus because, those of us who are in control know better how to win elections and what those policies should be. So, and I don't mean that's not directed towards Andrew Scheer. I'm not suggesting that Andrew or the party didn't deal wisely with Maxime Bernier, but I'll shut up there.
Okay.
I know it takes a certain skill to be able to bring people together after a leadership campaign, and some people have it more than others, right? But nevertheless, there's never going to be a perfect political party. The current scenario is we have the Conservative Party of Canada, and whatever imperfections we have, we need to work within the party to bring about change. And I think there's mechanisms, there's means to bring about change. And I know at the time that Maxime was contemplating starting a new political party, I communicated with him, and I'm sure others did too. Please don't. Why don't you step outside of the political arena, be a leader in waiting, be a voice for conservatism. There's lots of things you can do if you feel you can't operate under the current leadership. But starting a new political party was a bad strategy, and we're really concerned. Like I said, I know people with a lot of money sitting on the sidelines waiting for the outcome of the election, and never really dawned on me until one of them said to me, he said, if you look at how the vote can split with Bernier now in, is that we can find ourselves with Justin Trudeau squeaking in with maybe less than 30% of the popular vote, but because of vote splits, ending up to be able to form government with the NDP and the Greens. He said, so that's why this money is sitting aside and waiting for that election result. And I'm not talking about millions, I'm talking about billions of dollars that will move out of Canada if we don't get a better result than we currently have.
Well, one of the things, as I was alluding to during your short hiatus there, was the idea that the reason, I think a fair assessment and analysis of any position is to look at why those who are disenfranchised with what they used to support is the fact that they don't feel like they're properly represented. And I can understand how Max represents what they see as an opportunity to have their voices heard and mean something. And, of course, in the case of the Conservatives, I'm talking about the SOCONs. The backbone of the party, it's like nobody likes to be taken for granted. And this is something that Andrew Scheer not only has to pull the people within his leadership circle together and his delegates and his MPs, but he has to get his act together when it comes to the grassroots if he wants to actually win this thing in the fall, because there's tens of thousands, if not millions, of votes riding on it. And if you want to win and you want to defeat or get around the vote splitting that you articulated, which would be so detrimental to not only Alberta but to the country as a whole, then the first thing you've got to do is go back to the members of your family and say, okay, what's it going to take to get you back in the fold? Because every vote, especially this election, every vote counts.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to build a coalition. It's not easy. But, that key coalition is conservatives of the fiscal conservatives, libertarians, and social conservatives. And, and the irony really is in Canada, our biggest battle is on the front of freedom. I mean, we're up against not a liberal government. They're liberal only in name. They're actually a socialist government. And the difference is down the U.S., people like Alan Dershowitz, he calls himself a liberal, a classical Democrat, and he says, I fear far more what's happening in the radical left than anything that's happening on the right. And the radical left in the U.S. is going extreme, and Trudeau actually represents that extreme here in Canada. And the people have to understand that it's our freedoms, our actual freedoms, that are threatened under this type of thinking, of mentality of the current Liberal Party. And so, yeah, we need to defeat the Liberals, and we need and I hope the Liberals will go back to the drawing board and become a Liberal Party again instead of a Socialist Party as they are now.
All right. Well, let's take the last few moments here. We've got about 3 minutes left, and talk about the threat of Western alienation / separation. Because I was listening to a commentator today on our local, our favorite terrestrial radio station here in Ottawa, and he, from my perspective, he got it completely wrong, laying it all at the feet of Kenny. And I remember thinking to myself, no. This goes back all the way to Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who started this fire in the first place. And if you're going to, when you bring in somebody like Notley, who has a globalist agenda, you've got Trudeau 2.0, who has a globalist agenda and has said he's the first post-nationalist prime minister, whatever the heck that means. So how are people... Go ahead.
That just simply means he's not for Canada. He's for getting rid of Canada's identity and letting the govern us. That's his mindset. He's a globalist. Yeah. Yeah.
What it really means is that he's stupid and doesn't know anything about history, because Canada's not the first post-national nation state, or the United Kingdom actually is, but. Who's counting?
Yeah, let's not split hairs.
I thought you were going to say the Russia before the Soviet Union was, because
well,
that's an example of getting rid of nationalism and having the Soviet Union, all of the nations being absorbed by one grand power. But yeah, I mean, of course, in answer to the question that you have, Nick, it's. Jason has his ear to the ground. He knows what the mood of Albertans are, and he's simply stating it. He's not creating any sort of sentiment towards separation. If anything, he's the one reason why we're not having a separatist vote at this time, right? And we know he's going to fight smart and strong for Albertans. But the fact is, he's fighting for Canada. Albertans' contribution to the rest of Canada is huge. If you just look at the transfer payments, the tens of billions of dollars each and every year to the rest of Canada from Alberta, it makes pure mathematical sense. It's common sense that we would be much better off separating as a province from the rest of Canada. That's not my sentiment, my emotion. I love Canada. As you know, I've fought side by side with both of you in elections, federal elections in Canada. But I do know that at a certain point, just like a marriage, if you have a marriage and one of the spouses is being abused again and again, at a certain point you say, I've had enough. And quite seriously, I believe this being the second round with a Trudeau, it's not Trudeau by himself. You have to understand, Trudeau could not do this without the support of the elite in Toronto and Montreal, the media elite, the cultural elite. Those are the folks that support Justin Trudeau's campaign against the oil industry in Alberta. And from Albertans' perspective, we have had enough. And there's certainly going to be a lot of pressure on Mr. Kenney to have a vote with respect to renegotiating the transfer payments. And again, it depends what happens federally this fall. If we get a conservative government elected, I think Albertans would prefer, even though it's very costly to stay in in Canada, Albertans still would prefer to see Canada work. That election result this fall is going to be very telling. And Jason Kenney is not to blame for the sentiment of separation in Alberta. It's 100% on the shoulders of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and those who put him where he is.
With that, I have to stop you there because we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Roy. That was a quick half hour. It always is. There's so many more threads we could pick up on that. But so thank you for joining us this evening, and I look forward to our conversations in the future.
Absolutely, Nick and Joseph, and have a great rest of the summer. And let's hope and pray for good results this fall in the federal election. It would be good for all of Canada if we can elect a conservative government.
Amen to that. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure. All right. Have a good night.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is round 1 and 2. Okay, that's
Where's the bell? Where's the bell?
Where's the bell? Where's the bell?
There we go.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, bottom of the hour, so we're going to take a few minutes break. So we will be back in just a few minutes here in the Combat Zone on the Think Radio Network. Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and together we're Nick and Joe.
Yes,
Pregnant
we
pause,
are.
Pregnant pause.
Yes, well,
and
no,
Nick is just absorbed on his computer.
Well, what happened was I forgot to flash up the chat feature, and I'm just trying to get caught up on some of the brilliant comments made by our brilliant audience.
Do we have a brilliant audience?
Of course, they listen to us. Come on. We got to give them credit.
Okay.
If they weren't listening to us, they'd be listening to somebody else, and they wouldn't be that.
I did pose the question, what do people think about Max Bernier? So I suppose I should have expected a lengthy essay on what people think about Max Bernier.
And what was the general consensus?
I don't know. It's too long for me to read. Sorry, AJ. I'll get around to reading it, but I don't think that we're going to be able to do that right now. Okay, look, guys, we want to move on to the next subject. So fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen, because this is a good one.
Oh, my God, I can't believe this.
So, yeah, and I had to play this to Nick. I have a sound bite I want to play. This is Frank Figliuzzi. I think I'm pronouncing that name right. Frank Figliuzzi is a former assistant director or deputy director or something like that for counterterrorism for the FBI. So this is a fellow that is not just a yahoo out there, although there are some people that are going to think he's a yahoo after listening to him on MSNBC.
I think you're insulting yahoos.
So here he goes. Pay attention to this and tell me, ladies and gentlemen, or send us a message or whatever. And Nick, you got to think carefully to follow his logic. So here we go.
Our next guest is not proud of a prediction he made. 5 days ago, Frank Figliuzzi, the former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, wrote the following in an op-ed in the New York Times, and we quote, "Instinct and experience tell me we're headed for trouble in the form of white hate violence stoked by a racially divisive president. He has chosen a re-election strategy based on appealing to the kinds of hatred, fear, and ignorance that can lead to violence." And once again tonight, we have Frank Figliuzzi back on our broadcast.
Now, I've just paused the soundbite just there because I just want to set this up because we edited it. We took out a whole section here of about 2 minutes where this guy is talking about the president and how, you know, he's been using all this racially charged language, etc., feeding racism, feeding white supremacy, etc. Now, but this is what takes the cake. The next 30 seconds or so, just try to follow the logic around here, guys, because I can't think, Nick, of a better example of Trump derangement syndrome than what we're about to hear. So pay attention carefully, because if you don't get it, you're going to miss it. If you don't listen carefully, you're going to miss the logic.
We have to understand the adversary and the threat we're dealing with. And if we don't understand how they think, we'll never understand how to counter them. So it's the little things and language and messaging that matters. The president said that we will fly our flags at half-mast until August 8th. That's 8/8. Now, I'm not going to imply that he did this deliberately, but I am using it as an example of the ignorance of the adversary that's being demonstrated by the White House. The numbers 8/8 are very significant in neo-Nazi and white supremacy movement. Why? Because the letter H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, and to them, the numbers 8/8 together stand for Heil Hitler. So we're going to be raising the flag back up at dusk on 8/8. No one's thinking about this. No one's giving him the advice, or he's rejecting the advice. So understand your adversary to counter the adversary.
I know you're keeping your options open there, Frank, but as chilling as that is to hear, you're saying it is possible that someone who knows better is authoring or editing the words that show up and are read verbatim or are supposed to be read verbatim by the president.
I'm concerned about who is writing his script and his speeches, and what would fascinate me is what he's rejecting. So it's possible that several iterations of this speech were given to him, someone with expertise, and believe me, the expertise expertise exists in our intelligence community and our law enforcement community and our civilian population on how to counter radicalization. So those folks could have advised him on writing an excellent speech that would have created an obstacle on this path to violence that we're on. But he either chose to not take that advice, or he's not even willing to solicit the advice.
I'm sorry. I got to tell you, when I first heard this, I tore the headphones right off my head.
I was going to spring this on. I was going to spring this on Nick. He asked me. He said, "What do you want to talk about tonight?" And I said, "Nick, I'm not going to tell you what my subject is. I'm going to surprise you. You will like it or you won't like it, but I'm just not going to do it." And then I thought better of it, because I knew that if I did this in the middle of the show, that he would have a meltdown. He would throw things at the computer. We'd be off the air, whatever. Okay, so
it would not have been family friendly.
No, it wasn't family friendly.
No,
I don't hear that kind of language from Nick very often. But
I want to know who hired this guy.
Okay, but this guy was like an assistant deputy director for counterterrorism. And I'm thinking, how is it that you've stopped terrorism with people like this in charge? I mean, seriously. Now, Frank, listen, okay, guys, Frank, I don't know what you're thinking, but when you said you didn't want to imply anything about the president and his motivation or anything like that, I think you were a little off base there, Frank. Maybe a little bit disingenuous. I don't want to imply dishonest, Frank.
That's like saying I don't want to suggest the guy's still beating his wife.
Okay, but I can't. I just can't, Nick. I cannot find the right words.
That's because the right words do not exist.
Lunacy, the gymnastics that these guys have to go through, the mental and the verbal, to come up with the 8-8. Okay. Now, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether that's a neo-Nazi thing or not, the significance of 8-8. But to think that the President of the United States would have been advised that you cannot raise the flag that you've had at half-mast for a few days, out of respect for the victims of this shooting in El Paso and in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, okay, that you should have thought better and not raised the flag afterwards at half-staff for 2 days or 3 days on 8-8.
Do you realize
that's code for Heil Hitler?
Do you realize
the
Heil millions Hitler of Americans and Canadians who don't even know who Hitler was? I mean, this stuff only matters if people actually understand the frame of reference. Like, this is so absolutely asinine.
Okay, you see, you want to get on to the historical context and whether or not anybody understands it. And here's my answer. I know who Adolf Hitler was.
Yes.
I still don't get it.
I'm sitting
and by the way, you could get this clip off of YouTube, okay? The fellow's name is Frank Figliuzzi. Frank Figliuzzi.
Play that last... where Fig Triuzzi or whatever his name is. I still want to know who hired the guy.
FBI. It was the FBI.
Well,
okay,
they
hang on a second. We'll listen to the beginning
in.
of this again. This is Brian Williams, by the way, and you guys. I'm telling you, people, check this out on YouTube, okay? Because you spell his name, by the way, Figliuzzi, okay? And you have to see how deadly earnest and serious the moderator, Brian Williams from MSNBC, is when he's discussing this. Okay, and just listen to his voice again.
Our next guest is not proud of a prediction he made. 5 days ago, Frank Figliuzzi, the former FBI assistant director for counterintelligence, wrote the following in an op-ed in the New York Times, and we quote, "Instinct and experience tell me we're headed for trouble in the form of white hate violence stoked by a racially divisive president. He has chosen a re-election strategy based on appealing to the kinds of hatred, fear, and ignorance that can lead to violence."
Okay, so that is Brian Williams. And I'm telling you, the earnestness, the seriousness, it's just beyond description. Nick, it's not often that I can't find words. Absurd, malarkey, comical, idiotic,
insane.
Okay, I don't think it just reminds me of.
Well, yeah, no kidding. This fits that category. Now, I looked it up.
Really stupid.
There are conservative bloggers out there. One of the most popular is a guy called Mark Dice. Okay, Mark or Mike. Anyway, Mr. Dice has 1.5 million, almost 1.6 million subscribers. Do you know what MSNBC gets in views per day?
No.
About 616,000.
No. Well,
I
it's
mean,
paying
he gets
somebody's salary.
Yeah, but the point is, you've got I'm having a real hard time with this. You've got conservative bloggers out there. If you took the top 5 conservative bloggers, okay, and you decide who they are, and you added their views and their subscriptions together, you would blow the mainstream media out of the water by a landslide. These people are irrelevant. They're idiots. They're absolutely the tone in his voice was just mine. You know what? I have had predictions that I've made that I'm embarrassed about too. I wasn't proud of, but I didn't end up on a news show talking about it.
Right. Well, you know it is, Nick. There's a conspiracy in the White House.
Yeah,
and we don't know who it is, but it is serious.
Oh my God. So look, if I sound like I'm losing my mind, there's a reason for it. It doesn't take long to lose a mind that small anyway. But why didn't the journalist, who is it, AJ, asked this question, why didn't a journalist, much less Brian Williams, come out and challenge this guy? Clearly,
because he believes it, man. He believes it. They all believe it. This is the thing.
Even if you believe it, you have to You have to say, okay, there are those who would say, how do you respond?
Oh no, but Frank is an expert. And we live in the tyranny of experts.
Do you know what an expert is?
Well, this guy's clearly an expert. By the way, counterintelligence, not counterterrorism. And I cannot think just as I said he was counterintelligence, it occurred to me there's an apt description.
You got that right. But an expert is actually 2 definitions boiled together. An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. That's what this guy is. I mean, give me a break. Or somebody who shows up with a briefcase from more than 50 miles away is an expert.
Okay. Now, you see, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, I am really very happy that I gave Nick the heads up, because it would have been a disaster had he heard that for the first time while we were alive tonight.
Oh,
okay,
my God.
So that's round 3 in the books, or round 2, or round 1A, or whatever.
1A.
Okay,
all right.
Nick.
Now, there's a story out of the, where did it go? I had it. Let me pull it up. There's a story out of the New Millennia. I think that's the name of it. That's the name of that new news agency.
The Millennial Post.
The Millennial Post. That's it. The Millennial Post.
The Post Millennial. It's
yeah,
the
that
postmillennial.com.
Yes. They have a story about the human rights commissions. And the thrust of the story is, because a lot of people have been paying attention to the HRCs lately because of this guy, Yanis, whatever his name is, who dresses up like a woman, and they wanted his parts bikini waxed, and a female who does this, a woman who has a business doing bikini waxes on women, said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not playing with you. I'm not touching you. No, I'm not doing it. So he took her to the Human Rights Commission, and realizing that he made $2,500 on the deal just for complaining. I have a feeling that's how. And now he's in trouble with the law, by the way. They've seized his computer. They wouldn't let him into his house. And I'm specifically calling him a he, because I don't care how he dresses. He was born a male. Not a very good one, but a male. And you don't change that just by rearranging the plumbing. So I refuse to play that game. So anyway, so the question becomes, with cases and examples like this, and this is by no means the only one, there are all kinds of examples of people who use the kangaroo court of the HR's human rights commissions at the both provincial and federal levels to pound somebody into the ground. The process is the punishment. Because what they'll do is they'll say, we're taking you to the HRC, and you have to hire a lawyer, you have to defend yourself, but the person making the complaint doesn't have to pay a penny. It's all covered by the taxpayer. So the punishment is the process. And it's also how they make their living, because what will happen is they'll say, look, your legal fees are going to be $50,000. You pay me $30,000, we'll drop it, and I'll pull my... So it's blackmail. And I think it's time that we just put the sword through the heart of these things. We have laws that govern discrimination. We have laws that deal with libel and slander. And if we just enforce those laws, what reason would we have for the human rights commissions?
Right. Well, look, I hesitate to say that I don't care about discrimination. Of course I care about discrimination. And I think that most decent people do. But I think that we've crossed way over a line when it comes to discrimination. And everybody discriminates. The question is, on what basis are you discriminating? That's the first thing. The second thing is, can you really get into the mindset of people? And by the way, the whole point of human rights commissions and human rights tribunals, Nick, is to bypass the court system where you actually have rules of evidence. You actually have proper rules of procedure. So someone once said that the wheels of justice turn slowly. Okay, they do. They do turn slowly. But there are reasons for that.
That's right.
The point of a slow-moving, cumbersome justice system, presumably, is that you don't want innocent people to get caught up in it. You want people. The government has to prove the case. If you're suing somebody and it's a civil procedure, you have to prove your case as well. Human rights tribunals are not really about that. And look, I think that they should just go.
Yeah,
period.
Well,
finished. Full stop. I think there's no place in a free and democratic society where the rule of law prevails, as it should prevail. I see no reason why we should have extrajudicial tribunals and administrative courts like human rights tribunals adjudicating cases that are too weak, too insignificant, and frankly too bizarre and stupid to go to a regular court. I mean, can you picture this kind of a case actually getting before a real court? Whether or not you're going to force a woman to wax male genitalia as a human right? As a human right? How about her right to say no? That's just too weird. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Well, you're discriminated against me because... And this is the thing, okay? Look, no offense to this Yannick person or whoever he is, okay? No offense. But if you really want to be a woman, have the guts to go through with the operation at least, okay? Okay? Like, this is a guy
and
without the courage of his own
it.
convictions, okay? So, yeah, I'm a woman because I feel like a woman, but I'm not going to go under the knife. So, really, come on. If you're not going to go under the knife, look, dress the way you want to dress, okay? I'm not saying you shouldn't dress the way you want to dress. I'm not saying you shouldn't talk the way you want to talk. I'm not saying you shouldn't act the way you want to act, okay? If that's what turns your crank, all the power to you. Be my guest. But if you're not going to go under the knife, okay, all right.
Even if you do want to go under the knife, pay for it yourself.
Well, okay, that's a separate issue, but it's a fair issue.
Yeah, but because now you're forcing your worldview on people who don't agree with you. You're forcing them to fund what you
the problem with that argument, Nick, and I agree with you, okay? Don't get me wrong. I'm not defending the opposite side, and I'm not even trying to play devil's advocate. I'm saying this is the problem, and we might as well face up to what the real problems are, because then we'll never be able to deal with them, okay? The problem with what you've just said, Nick, is that this is not today considered to be simply somebody's point of view. What they've succeeded in doing is they've succeeded in convincing people that this is a medically necessary procedure for their physical and mental and psychological health.
But see, here's the problem with that argument. Okay, if that's true, and I had no intention of going here, but if that's true, then why is the suicide rate at 42%?
Well, this is a whole can of worms.
Oh,
it's
it
a
is.
Pandora's box, and I'm not saying we don't want to go there.
We just don't have the
I'm saying
time.
that if we want to go there, we need some time.
Yeah.
And we need to bring in some other people. But I'll tell you, I have psychologists, psychiatrists. I have a lot of medical professions in my family, my extended family. I don't know any one of them who agree with this whole thing about doing these operations as a means of protecting or promoting the mental health of the individuals, okay? It's really largely a fad. And here's the thing, okay? I've spoken to a number of psychiatrists and psychologists who would tell me, but they won't say this in public, that they completely think that the whole argument is asinine, but they're afraid to speak out because they're afraid of losing their license to practice. And
that's a whole nother tragedy we'll have to save for another day.
It is. But, there's a real problem here, Nick, when you think about it. Is the medical profession the place to be fighting out these ideological battles? I mean, there's medicine is supposed to be about science, or the best kind of science, or as close to science as we can possibly come. And what's happened is it's become very politicized. So the perfect example of this is the idea of conversion therapy. The idea that a person who has a sexual attraction to the same sex, who feels that they want to go to see a therapist and they want to work these feelings through.
Right.
Now, I don't know whether or not it's appropriate. I don't know whether or not you can medically treat that kind of feeling. I suspect that you can, but whether you can or you can't, governments today are, in Canada anyway, are seriously contemplating outlawing the procedure, writing a law saying you are not allowed as a therapist to listen to this patient who's coming and saying, I have a sexual attraction to the same sex. I feel it's wrong. I want you to help me deal with these feelings. And the politicians are saying we want to outlaw that. And I'm going, that's a medical issue. That's an issue between the patient and the doctor, and the question of whether or not it makes sense to have that kind of therapy is a medical question. It's not a legal question. It's a medical question.
You're absolutely right.
And so why should the politicians be interfering in that medical question?
Because they have an agenda they want to promote.
Well, this is it. This is my point
there's
exactly.
There's a case in B.C. that I just perused real quickly, so I don't have all the details. But a father of a child, and I can't remember male or female, was just told by the B.C. Supreme Court that he has no right to interfere with hormonal therapy to allow that child to go.
How old is the child, do you know?
Well, it was just still in school. Now, again, which level of school, I don't know. But what difference does it make? Until they're 18, you're responsible for them. So if they're in school, either in grade school or high school, is besides the point. He's still responsible for them. And he does not, according to the BC Supreme Court, have the right to interfere with the school if they want to start them on hormonal therapy to change the gender. And I find that absolutely outrageous that, you're going to take my child, which I'm responsible for, and tell me what responsibilities I have and what I don't. Either I'm totally responsible or I'm not responsible at all. And as a parent, I'm choosing option one. Anyway. Joseph, that's an hour.
Yes, it is, Nick.
They always go by like a blur.
Hang on just a second, Nick. That's round 4. I got a little confused tonight because we had Roy on there for that double session, and then you were thinking we should be going for a break, and I wasn't ready to go for a break because we didn't have a break during that time, and et cetera, et cetera. So a little confusing, a little bit, and of course there was the, oh man, I still can't get over that 8-8 thing. Okay, that's the president. The president of the United States
said today. I was just looking at another site. There's a great site out there that I sometimes use called Vlad Tepes blog. And on that website, somebody made the comment so that every pianist who plays piano on a keyboard that has 88 keys is now a Nazi.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
I didn't think. Well, of course, but it's a conspiracy. Their minds are being taken over.
That's right. Even if they don't recognize it. That makes it even more insidious. They're like the Borg. They've been absorbed.
Okay. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we, let me think, what should we be talking about before we go? Download our app.
Yes, download our app. And we are continuously working and tinkering on not only the website, but on the show to make it better and more entertaining for you, the listener. So get out there and promote it. And we have a contest going right now, a free trip to Disneyland for anyone, for the person who brings in the most new listeners. All they have to do to claim their prize is pay for the trip.
Okay.
You should have seen the look on Joseph's
I'm thinking to
face.
myself, okay, Nick, Nick and I have not discussed this yet. But Nick, hey, listen, man, if you want to pay for somebody to go to Disneyland.
No, you didn't hear me.
I did hear you.
Okay.
Be my guest. Okay, we're getting a little silly now, ladies and gentlemen, because we've
past
gone
our
over
bedtime.
time a little bit. Thank you very much for tuning in. I am Joe. He is Nick. This is the Combat Zone, and we will catch you again next week. Until then, stay safe. God bless.